Hello, and welcome to this edition of People in Transition. I'm your host, Bob Durst. I've been hiring, firing, and mentoring executives, frontline employees, interns, and job seekers in companies around the world through a host of transitions, some difficult, but most very good. I've worked with people in Hong Kong, India, Australia, and across the U.S. What sets them apart? A lot. But there's more they have in common. And one of those commonalities is transition is a part of life. This experience has given me a bird's eye view on a variety of trends, economies, industry disruptors, and transitions that are big and small. It's also brought me into contact with the thought leaders and decision makers you need to meet. The people who can make the difference that matters to you right now. Imagine knowing exactly what to do next and how to know it's time to make your big change. The inside track you're going to access during our future episodes is better than a crystal ball. It's the exact information you need to take that next step. Whether you're a new grad applying for your first professional job, someone looking to transition your work experience into a promotion, launching your own company, or maybe even starting to plan your retirement, you're in transition, and this series is for you. We all know transition can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. And it's even fun when you have VIP access to the future you want. Are you tired of uncertainty, of being passed up? We'll share with you the tools and skills that can take your dreams to the front of the line. So, if change is on your horizon, or maybe just the thought of change, you won't want to miss this discussion. It could be the exact edge you need to turn transition into an amazing opportunity. Well, JB, I am so excited to have you with us on this episode. What an incredible background. What an incredible life story that you have. Graphic artist, social media influencer, public speaking coach, on different even programs. You have to tell our listeners kind of how those all fit together and how you got to where we're at today.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me. My pleasure. And sure, where I come from, my degree is pre-medical exercise physiology. What's so great, I think, about, let's say, my story is for your audience, the focus is on transitioning. So like you mentioned, from college to first job or between jobs or getting laid off or going into retirement, the skills required to do that, let's say graciously, is exactly what we're going to discover right now. So my degree is pre-medical exercise physiology. But in my sophomore year, I had my first audition for a Hollywood film. And I auditioned for that film. I got in it. And from there, I got an agent to help me find more work. And so then I did theater, and there's a transition even between film and theater. And a lot of film actors, believe not necessarily that they're better than theater actors. It's not like that, but they're just it's a different type of skill there. And then theater actors believe they have a different type of skill. So I had to transition from this group of thinking and people to this type of thinking and people. So I did that to theater. And then I did musical theater, voiceovers, motion capture for video games. I then transitioned into starting another company for personal training. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, so I've only had my own businesses, and that's a transition in and of itself. I then began to direct and then produce, and Transamerica, the Fortune 500 company, found one of my companies, and they wanted me to film their innovation films across North America. And so as I did that, I found myself working with a lot of CEOs and executives and corporate type people. And from there, I then moved into coaching. And
wow.
Then, right? So it's like there were so many, and along the way, I did real estate and other types of investing. And you mentioned that, earlier when we were talking, that there's a core group of skills that can really help you to transition effectively. And so for me, it really started when I knew since I was 9 years old or so that I was going to be on television. But I really I wasn't so concerned about how to make that happen. But I was very also interested in the human body and how that worked, right? So I remember when I was 9 years old growing up, I had remote control cars, and one of my remote control cars had a cord to the controller, and another one of them was wireless. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember one day there was a sunset. I was about 9 years old, and I just saw people walking. And I looked at them and I was just thinking to myself, how does that work?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? I was like, they don't have a cord at all. Right? And it was, so I committed from that day to figuring out how the body works, how we work as people. And that's what brought me to university, to
Oh,
college,
wow.
to focusing on that degree.
Very interesting.
Hmm.
So, JB, we're sitting here kind of the end of March. If we would have done this the end of February, maybe a whole different set of questions than what we have now. And many of the listeners are going to have been in quarantine. Maybe some of them have been sick. Maybe some of them have been laid off. Maybe some of them are struggling. In your coaching, you
Yeah.
don't always coach the diamond. Sometimes you coach the piece of coal and to bring that diamond-like quality out. What would you tell these people that right now may feel like that piece of coal so that they can have their luster back again?
Sure. The most important thing is what I call your atomic core. So, what I do is I help people get into alignment by removing mental blocks. That's my focus, that's my expertise. And the biggest thing that I find is that people are all the time sitting on a pile of gold. And that doesn't change. This current situation right now, if you're quarantined, which we all are, so in this current situation, you are still you. And what is very important to understand is when, if, however, this situation passes or changes, this is an opportunity to take that time to really pay attention to that. So what happens a lot of times is when there's a lot of noise and when our routine is happening, a lot of times we get stuck in our routine. And that place of routine is oftentimes a place of comfort, and a place of comfort is a place of safety. And your real truth, your atomic core, your fulfillment, your freedom, the reason why you're here on this planet is never found in that place of comfort. It's always in the place of risk or adventure or doing something slightly uncomfortable. So right now, the wee bit of a gift that we've been given is a little bit of discomfort. So this is the time where you can really take a look at who you are as a person, what your core skills are, what your core values are, and how can you apply them and use them right now in quarantine and out of quarantine.
How would you suggest one of our listeners do that? I mean, do you just kind of sit back and close your eyes and listen to Yanni, or what do you do?
Sure, sure. One of there are a few steps, right? When we get people into alignment. So alignment, first of all, is a state of being. It's a place where it's just like what happens with the spine. When the spine is out of alignment, you can have numbness in your limbs, you could walk a little bit crooked, you could have pain. But when it gets in alignment, you've got a lot more freedom of emotion and flow. So what we have to do here to get in alignment is we want to ask yourself a few questions. Of course, we want to figure out why we're here, but let's make it a little more simple than that. What are you good at? What do you like? What energizes you? I love interviews. I love speaking. I love public speaking. I like talking. That's what I'm good at. And so for me, I shaped my entire business around that quality, that skill. Then how can we use it in a current situation? So for me, in this current situation, a lot of people are quarantined, right? So a lot of people need some positivity or help or insight. So there are
Mm-hmm.
companies right now who have their teams who are quarantined at home. So for me, I thought, how can I help them out? So we can get on a big, gigantic Zoom call with 100 or 200 people and motivate and inspire that way. If I didn't adapt in that fashion, then I would say, oh, I'm a public speaker and I only do it in large auditorium. If everybody's quarantined, I have to adapt and figure out how can I do it in this current situation. So whatever it is that you're good at, how can you begin to utilize that, access that, put it into action right now? Not after quarantine, but right now. Because if it works now, we can figure out a way for it to work later as well, unless we have to adapt slightly again. But what are you good at? Number one. How can you begin to utilize that right now? Number two. A really helpful question is, what bothers you in the world? That's a very helpful question.
Why is that helpful? What is that going to give you?
I found when I ask my clients that question, after they go, whoa, right? It hits you kind of right between the eyes. It causes you to really think about what agitates you. So any kind of emotion is better than like no emotion, right? So he's like, it bothers me that there are people that don't have food. It bothers me right now that some people that aren't working and they need work. Let's just say that's the thing. Let's say it bothers you that people are not working right now. Well, we have to take it a little step further. What can you do about that? And once you start taking action to solve a problem that bothers you, this can then fuel your life. This can then give you purpose, because there's a reason things bother you. But if we just let them bother you and we don't take action with it, it's completely useless.
Yeah.
So for some, right? So it's just something to get the balls rolling in your mind a little bit. It's not, you don't want to stop there. You want to keep going further. Most importantly, taking action and thinking about what can fuel you and what are you good at? What gives you energy? That's a big one.
That question, what bothers you? The first thing that came to mind was my son-in-law, but that's a whole different podcast. So.
Oh man. Yeah.
Wait till he hears that one. So JB, what if I'm an introvert and I hear about kind of this whole notion of networking and the importance of networking, especially now when you can't go it alone, but I'm an introvert. How would you coach that person to help them be more successful at the networking?
Again, my clientele are CEOs and celebrities, and I work with introverts and extroverts. And surprisingly, a lot of these celebrities, they're introverts. That's a surprising thing to a lot of people. So let's talk about what that means. What it really means is that you may not get your energy from interacting with large groups of people. You might get it from when you're in alone, having that alone time. And for me, I get more of energy that way as well. So theoretically, I could possibly be described as an introvert myself. Now, if you're shy, that's a different thing, right?
Yeah.
So let's just say, and of course, with the public speaking coaching, one of the first things I deal with people who are classifying themselves as shy is I want to remove the labels first. So first of all, let's go ahead and not call ourselves introverts for a while. Let's just say that we're a person, and then we also don't need to put ourselves in another box that call ourselves shy. So let's just remove the labels for a moment. And we still have to figure out, what is your atomic core? What motivates you? Why are you here? What do you care about? Once we get to the bottom of that, you'll find out that you have no trouble talking at all. The issue a lot of the times is you're having to be in a situation talking about something you don't really care about or believe in, which you should naturally feel highly uncomfortable in that situation. So even if you're a top executive at a company doing pretty well financially, if there's something that's out of alignment, that is the core reason why you still get uncomfortable in front of crowds of 1,000. It's not really that a crowd of 1,000 is so intimidating. There's something else that's wrong. And so that's one of the, I guess, you got Toastmasters and all these people that say you got to get used to speaking in front of people. That's not really the case. I've performed in crowds of 20 and crowds of thousands. And crowds of 20 can be way more terrifying than thousands.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly. JB, you have a friend, and he was in the hospitality industry. And during these COVID-19 times, the hospitality industry was particularly hit hard. He or she was impacted. He or she comes to you for advice. What should I do? And let's add another element. I might be thinking of doing something else with my life. I've been in this hospitality for 20 years. Maybe I'll do something else. What would you coach them?
Okay, yeah, we're talking about, we've got some deeply ingrained beliefs and habits over here. What I want to take a look at is, over the past 19, 20 years, what skills have you acquired that are in alignment with who you are as a person? And what we can do with those skills that you've acquired is then apply them to what you really want to do after all. Because there's something that you want to do after these 19, 20 years that you've probably wanted to do the entire time. And the core of who you've been throughout this 19 and 20 years has never changed. But along these couple of decades, you've acquired a few new skills. Maybe you know something that you didn't know before about people or even about this particular industry that you could bring towards, let's say you want to go into candle pouring. I like pouring candles myself. So let's say we can apply that over here. Well, what I learned in the hospitality industry is that people actually care about the smell of cookies. Awesome. Got it. Now let's pour a candle and maybe we can have a warm cookie scent. You see? So we want to take what we've learned in those past 2 decades, apply it to what you actually care about. And then most importantly, we got to take some action.
First time in any of my podcasts that we talk about candle pouring and cooking cookies. So, so you're a first for me here. Thank you. I appreciate it. JB, what are the areas that you see most people struggle with when they talk about transition, whatever kind of transition it is?
Sure. The biggest struggle, of course, is fear. They tend to not know if it's going to work or not. They have a whole lot of comfort, which is false comfort, built into the security of what they've had before. So what we've possibly learned from COVID-19, this coronavirus, is whatever security we thought we had can very quickly be uprooted. And so we find ourselves that when we're scared to make a transition, really the reason we're afraid is because we think we have some stability in where we currently are. So there is a false truth to that. And if we can simply understand that if you would step into and take action towards what you're actually passionate about, you are way more likely to be successful. Yeah. So we actually mitigate the risks by taking the jump towards what you're passionate about.
Yeah, I have a fear of flying. And one of the coaches that has tried to help me talks about fear being false expectations about reality. And oftentimes it is those fears that we have that really holds us back the most.
Sure. I've got a and then what technique that we do. So we could do that now. First of all, to have a fear of flying is pretty normal. I mean, you are a human. We don't fly. The idea of going thousands of feet in the air, I would say, is a very natural fear. So I don't even know if I would call that a fear. I mean, my son wants to parachute, so let's just get that out on the table real quick. Very, very normal, very human. At the same time, and then what is like this. So, well, if this happens, then maybe I'll X, and then let's go there. Okay, maybe you will not have a client. Okay, and then what? Well, then I won't be able to pay this bill. Okay, if you don't pay this bill, and then what? Well, if I don't pay that bill for a month, then by the second month, I'll get evicted. Okay, so let's say you can't pay the bill for 2 months. And then what? Well, then I don't have a place to go. Okay, and then what? Well, then me and my, I have 5 children. Me and my 5 children will be living on the streets. Okay, and then what? And it sounds crazy, but keep going. Don't stop. Keep going. And all of a sudden, you'll live it, experience it. Your physiology will go there. And then the initial adrenaline will begin to decrease. And then you realize it wasn't that big deal to begin with anyways, and you've gone to the worst case scenario. So then when you back up to the first and then what, it's not as big a deal. And you can at least take that step.
I like that. I like that a lot. JB, it sounds like that you understand the importance of looking for a particular culture that fits you and what you're looking for. One of them might be a more laid back, one might be a hard charging, one might be entrepreneurial, one might be different than all of those. None of them being right or wrong, they're just different. I always think that when a person is in transition, they have an opportunity to kind of start something new and fresh. How do they go about finding that culture that fits them and their needs best?
I would say to think about it like this. As an entrepreneur, that's me, but this applies to any kind of transition from this corporate work to this job. Your goal as a human being and in life and in this work is to solve a problem. It's to help people, right? So that's the thing. So one of the easiest ways to figure out where you fit, where you belong, is do you care about the people that you're helping? So I had somebody reach out to me before. They said, hey, I've accomplished this amount of success financially and this amount of success in this area. Maybe I should be a coach. So I said to them, do you actually care about people?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're successful or not, that's a dime a dozen. But if you actually care about people and if you actually created, let's say, some kind of a system or formula for helping them get from point A to point B, and you want to see them succeed, and you're dedicated to that, then maybe you should be a coach.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I focus on CEOs and celebrities. I work with others as well. But for me, I love those people. I get them. I understand it. I know what it's like to feel alone or to be misunderstood or to be at the top, or everybody thinks you're doing well, but maybe you need somebody to talk to, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
get them intrinsically. And so for me, I care about them. So when you're thinking about who you can serve or where you want to work, if you want to be a university teacher, do you actually like college students? Because if you don't, I don't care if you fit in with all the teachers, but it's not going to work out well. You
Right.
won't be happy at the end of the day. I've had
Right.
friends who were cardiac surgeons, and I've worked with cardiac surgeons as well. But this person felt that I won't talk anything about them, but whatever their culture is, it just was very much not a fit for him, and he went into pediatrics.
Mm.
And then he loves children. So it was a blend of the people that you're around, but also the people that you serve, whom you serve. So if you could solve those two together, you'll be good to go. So do you care
Mm-hmm.
about the people that you're serving and working with, as well as the people that you're surrounded by? Are those the type of people that you want to become and be, for the next 20 years? Because who you hang around is who you'll become.
JB, I believe that your career and I think life overall is a curly journey. What might that mean to you?
I think that what that looks like is when you're getting from, let's say you want to get from point A to point B, this is the curly loop, right? It looks like it's not a straight line, but a lot of
Yep.
twists and turns along the way. Actually, one of my children was talking about this film the other day, and I think it's called Click. It's with Adam Sandler, and there was a remote controller that started and stopped his life. And at some points, it forwarded it through bad parts of his life, what he defined as bad. So he
Mm-hmm.
got sick, it forwarded through it for a week. Then he ended up getting cancer. It forwarded through his life for 6 or 7 years. So by the end, he missed out on all of his life. So the interesting thing is that the lesson from that is that even those things that are horrendous, I mean, those are bad, cancer and these diseases, that was life. That was
Mm-hmm.
still life. So each moment is each moment in a weird way if we're completely present. Because if we're in the past, that doesn't even exist, and the future hasn't yet happened. So the safest place to be is the present. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're in the present, I would even suggest that is your straight line.
Mm-hmm.
It only appears curly when you have an expectation that it would happen in a certain way. If you
Mm-hmm.
would be present, I think that your line would be very, very direct.
Another thought that I'm curious your reaction to: refuse to feel sorry for yourself. Own it. Do it. What does that mean to you, and how does it impact transitions, especially in these troubling times?
Sure, refusing to feel sorry for yourself. This is the idea of that concept. The way I would interpret that is that it's not about you, and it's not only about you. That's the best way I would do it. When we feel sorry for ourselves, I think that tends to keep us more stuck. And while the emotions, actual chemicals in the brain, they can be addictive, and your body begins to want those chemicals. So you want to stay in a pity party, that sort of thing. So I get that physiologically. That's not what you actually. It's not going to help you, right? It's not going to help you
Mm-hmm.
transition. So the reason we want to not necessarily feel sorry for ourselves is to understand this quote helps, right? Things don't happen to you, they happen for you. That's like very
Mm-hmm.
hard. That's
Mm-hmm.
hard to hear like in the moment of intense difficulty. But the thing I would say to somebody if they said this, because that could be a harsh way to say it to someone, I would say that if something very, very painful or horrible or challenging is currently happening to you right now, take a deep breath like I just did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I want to look for what action can you take right now. That's your only option. If you wait for someone to pick you up, to hand you something, to reach out a hand to you, if you wait for that, you're in victim state. And we cannot be in a victim state. We've got to be proactive. We have to pick ourselves up. And that's what the whole concept means to me.
What about I'm over 50 years old, or I'm a minority, or I'm whatever, fill in the blank, and I'm going through a transition? Is there anything different that I do?
No, like every situation is the same in that the biggest challenge is yourself.
Mm.
So there are real obstacles out there. If you're too short or if you're too tall, if you don't look the part, there's a stereotype for what,
Mm-hmm.
fits a CEO that is being searched for. And there's a reason for that. But it doesn't mean that you can't be that unless you decide to believe that stereotype, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you decide you don't want to accept that, you don't really have to. And that can also come across insensitive, but it's the only option you have, because any limitation or boundary that is accepted or placed upon anyone can only be placed upon you if you decide to hold on to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was watching the guy on Ellen the other day. I think he's got like one finger on the left hand and three on the right hand. And this guy's playing piano.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And Ellen said, like, seriously, of all the things you could have done, like piano is what you thought would be a good
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
He's got one
Wow.
finger on this hand. But it was. And then,
Yeah.
now he's on Ellen. You've got other people who possibly play piano better or in college or university to master the piano, and they're not on Ellen right now, right?
Yeah.
So the main thing is if there is a limitation that has been told to you or that you are certain knows exists. I'm not denying that there could be that. What you have to do as a human is decide if you want to let that jacket and weight be on your shoulders or not. And as a person, that's where you have your ability to choose.
Good coaching on that one. JB, what do you do kind of in the middle of the night? And I always pose this like this because I'm really brave during the day, but it's that darkness of the night. In the middle of the night, and those gremlins, they get in your head and they tell you you'll never find a job again, that you're not good enough. You're not as good, certainly, as you think you are. Maybe you've been an imposter all these years, and now they've finally found you out. How do you deal with that?
Sure. Take a wee bit of a baby step like this. Where is any area of your life that you are 100% certain that you perform pretty well in? Whatever that might be. I skateboard, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it could be that maybe if my ollie isn't as high as this guy's, can I roll pretty nicely, right? Can I roll
Mm-hmm.
forward? Do I have good balance, right? So where is it that you do perform really well? Are you a good critique of watches, right? Do you cook very good green beans? Like, what is it that you do well? And then take it from there. You know what? I do that pretty well. And what we want to do is create a bit of a winning cycle. Charlie Rocket, one of my clients, he's a motivational speaker as well. And he talks about a winning streak. And I think this plays into
Mm-hmm.
that a little bit. But what I
Mm-hmm.
want to do is create an anthem for yourself where we can
Mm-hmm.
just continue to play off of that, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And when the negative thing comes in and say, yeah, but so-and-so makes better green beans, or they're not as good as this, what we
Mm-hmm.
want to do is say, okay, you're right, and then keep going. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and keep going. So we can acknowledge that the best way to deal with the gremlin is not to put force back towards the gremlin, because then that's like yang and a yang, and we have to be yin and then yang, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when the
Mm-hmm.
gremlin comes, you can acknowledge it, say, okay, and let it go past, and then come right back to that small baby step of positivity. And then another gremlin comes, acknowledge it, and move back into the small baby step of positivity. That's the best way to create an upward cycle in the middle of the night.
JB, any tools that you've seen in the marketplace that help someone when they're going through a transition?
Tools in the marketplace.
They could be even a coach.
Yeah.
That's a tool, right?
Yeah, right. I was thinking it is helpful. I use this quote a lot. Everybody needs a mirror to see the back of your head. And so that's that coach. For me, athletes know this, right? Every athlete, Michael Jordan has a coach, Michael Phelps had a coach. And the coach that coached Michael Phelps, I don't know that he didn't accomplish what Michael Phelps accomplished, but just that other angle that he had was able to point things out for Michael Phelps to just guide him along that transition and
Mm-hmm.
along his growth. So it's
Mm-hmm.
extremely helpful to have that, even to have someone to connect with and be human with for a
Mm-hmm.
moment, and then have a proactive solution towards your goal. So coaching is a tool I discovered very early because of martial arts and sports and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But discovering it later in the realm of business and development has been really, really exciting. And that's why I do what I do. So I would say coaching is very, very helpful. Put somebody positive in your ear, So if you're
Hmm.
listening to motivational anything, that's probably the best tool as well. Just make sure that what you're listening to is building you up and inspiring you. Even though I do what I do, it took me a long time to understand that motivation, inspiration was actually a necessity and not like a luxury. I didn't
Hmm.
realize that. I
Hmm.
started to get testimonials from people that were doing things in their lives after being quote unquote motivated. And then statistically, I started noticing stats that said that you're not going to perform what you want to perform from a decreased state. You're going to be in a heightened state, an enlightened state of
Hmm.
being. So if you think about anything you've ever done that's worth anything positive, you were probably in a somewhat positive state of mind just as you were doing it. And so that's motivation and inspiration. So go ahead and put that in your ear. But most importantly, there is no tool anywhere that will replace you taking action yourself. You got to do that.
Journey of 1,000 miles begins with that first step, right?
That's right.
Any books that you would recommend people who are faced with transition?
A book. I think I quote this book kind of a lot. I was actually thinking about this author earlier today. The 4 Hour Work Week. I think I read it probably 15 plus years ago now, but I still think about it. 4 Hour Work Week is a great one, just to help you start thinking a little bit differently. So it doesn't seem like it's very transitiony, but it will put a fire underneath you and get you thinking creatively, which I think is a good spot to begin.
Good counsel on that book. It's an oldie but a goodie, I think.
Right.
So, JB, as we kind of wrap up here, if our listeners remember nothing else from today's episode, what do you want to leave them with? What do you want them to remember?
Sure. That you already have all the answers. That's it. You've got the answers. A lot of times we'll spend time looking outside of ourselves for it, but you already know those answers. And even in my, let's call it practice or what it is that I do, all I do is I help the person see and get to the answers that they already have. So if you realize that, it just causes you to think about yourself, your life, your outlook, your feelings a lot differently. And I hope you could get some hope with that understanding, because that is the truth. And everything that I do begins from that foundational statement.
JB, I've done a number of these podcasts. Very few of them have been as information filled, as positive, and looking forward as what you've provided us today. In these challenging times, I think that you gave hope as well as information and techniques to take that next step. So, JB, from my listeners to you, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
I hope you got as much out of that program as I did. So exciting and information packed. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen to my podcast. I hope it was worthwhile for you to bring me along with you as you drove to work, or you worked out, or you had some downtime that you could listen to people in transition. I'd love to hear from you on your thoughts for the program. Please send me a note, and we can ensure that we address any of the issues that you might have in future episodes. I hope that you share this podcast with your friends, people at the supermarket, people at the gym, because it's all about a conversation on people in transition. I hope you got some useful tips and ideas about what to do in transition. Again, this is Bob Gerst. You can find me on LinkedIn page. Feel free to send me a note there. And remember, we are all in transition. It just might not be today, but at some point in time, change happens. And the more you are prepared for it, the better you'll be. Thanks again. This is your host, Bob Gerst. See you next time on our next issue.